Let's close this part 1 of the HTML crash course with a discussion of inline or font-like elements. And first, let's look at physical character styles. So these are tags that mark up the text they surround, and the name of the tag is supposed to describe how the final result is going to look. And here are some examples. B, the tag, this text inside the tag should be bold. I, the text inside the tag, should be in italics. TT, what the heck is that? Well, it stands for teletype, and no one knows what a teletype is. A teletype is, something from the ancient days like smoke signals and telegraphs and slide rules and floppy disks. But the point is that it means a fixed width font. U underline, subscript, superscript, small, a little bit smaller, but you don't know how much. Big, a little bit bigger, but you don't know how much. Strike through it, so it'll have a horizontal line through it. Blink, and so forth. You can also use the font tag with an explicit font face like Times New Roman or Courier New, and color and size. But the font tag is pretty much obsolete and it's been superseded by CSS. And you can give a base font for the whole page as well. All right. There also are logical character styles. Logical character styles is the name of the tag is supposed to describe the kind of content, the kind of semantics, the meaning. And then the browser or the CSS file is say, well, how should that meaning be then visually presented? So rather than saying that something is bold, you can say that it's emphasized. Rather than saying it's italic, you can say it's strongly emphasized. Rather than it saying TT, no one uses the TT tag anymore. You can say it's a code sample, and so forth. And HTML purists argue strongly in favor of logical character styles rather than physical character styles. They say, well, the semantic meaning, it should be emphasized, it should be strongly emphasized, and so forth, is a different thing than how you present it. If you say B, it should be bold, and it would be goofy to use the B tag if it's going to come out green. But if you say EM for emphasis, and you decide the way you want to emphasize something is to make it green, that's not so strange. And this is true up to a point. But the fact is, it's very common for people to use B, I, subscript, superscript, and perhaps underline. They're just common. You think, oh, I want it in bold. You don't say, oh, I want it to be emphasized. So there's nothing wrong with using the physical character styles. It's true the logical character styles really fit more with the general approach to HTML, which is divorce the meaning of the tag from the visual appearance. But nevertheless, some of the tags at the top are widely used. Nobody ever uses TT. No one even knows what a teletype is anymore. Everybody uses code. And technically, it's up to the browser how to represent text inside a code element. But in practice, every browser in the world uses a fixed width font for code. So when you want a fixed width font, everybody uses the code element. Nobody uses the TT element. And they treat the code element really as if it was a physical character style. Display this in a fixed width font. All right. Hypertext links that we discussed earlier, they flow into an existing paragraph. So they are inline elements. Images, which we'll discuss shortly, are inline elements. You can flow an image into a paragraph. We'll give some example of that. And there's a few others as well, in particular span, which we also mentioned briefly in the section on div. All right, so here is bold, italic, teletype, whatever that means, but it means fixed width font, underline, subscript, superscript, and so forth. And you can see how it looks on the right. And the point is that you know ahead of time how it's going to look. When you say B, it means bold. When you say I, it means italic. And every browser will make B be bold and I be italic unless you override it with CSS. But with logical character styles, when you say EM for emphasized, you don't really know what the browser is going to do. Is it going to put it in italics? Is it going to make it bold? Is it going to make it bold italics? Is it going to make it bigger? You don't really know. And you don't need to know. You can then define that in your CSS file. So in general, the logical character styles are a better approach, and you kind of separate the meaning of the text from the visual appearance of the text. But in practice, at least B and I and subscript and superscript are used frequently in real life. All right, we said that images are inline elements. They can flow into an existing paragraph. They don't have to be set off with a separate line above and below it like block level elements. And so the general idea is you give a source attribute, which can be either a relative or an absolute URL. If it's your document, it's more likely, of course, to be a relative URL. You give alt if the browser doesn't display the images, or if images are turned off, or if someone's using a screen reader, they'll get this text instead. And it's a good idea, or at least it is a moderately good idea, to give a width and a height. Now, in the early days, it was critical to give a width and a height so that browsers could kind of lay out the page before the image was done being loaded, because the HTML text is loaded before the image. It goes back later and requests the image from the server, and it was important that the browser could kind of lay out the page before it got the images. But nowadays, browsers are pretty good at adapting, and they can kind of reformat things as it comes, and you have faster internet connections. So it's not so critical that you give a width and height now. If you don't give a width and height, the image will be displayed in whatever width and height the actual image appears as. Now, you don't want to shrink an image down. If the image is 1,000 by 500 and you say 100 by 50, well, then the end user sees a low resolution image, but they had to wait for a high resolution image to get sent across the network. So if you're going to display a small image, shrink down the image on your server before you send it across, unless you want to let the end user download it and save it. All right, so source is necessary. If you don't have a source, you don't have any image. Alt is required so that it can be made accessible. Width and height are recommended, but not absolutely required. And then the other most important attribute is align. If you say align equals right, the image gets pushed over to the right side of the page, and the paragraph that the image is in flows around it. If you say align equals left, the image gets pushed over to the left side, and the text flows around it. That means an image from one paragraph can hang down into another paragraph. Often that's what you want. But if you get to a new paragraph and you want to make sure that no images hang down into it, you can use BR with clear equals all. We'll mention this again in the next lecture, to make sure that you put in a line break and any images or tables that hang down are skipped. It's also quite useful to use H space and V space to control how much horizontal and vertical space are left around the image. Okay, so here's various images. Notice that they use relative URLs and they point to subfolders. It's a good practice. And I have different alignments: left, right, top, bottom, middle. And left and right are the two most common. Push the image all the way to the left of the browser element, push it all the way to the right, and text can flow around it.